Okay, as you can see, this presentation is about helping overseas Americans to register and vote in 2020, which means primarily working online and by mail. I think most people know this, but I'm Mary Stewart Burgher. I'm the chair of the FAWCO Overseas U.S. Voting Committee, and I'm always looking for extra members, so I will be mentioning that a tiresome number of times. Off we go. Now, come on. We start with our little outline. Basically, we're talking about voter registration and assistance in the time of COVID-19. Basically, the session has three sections. The first is the message that we would like to give to the individual voter with lots of details. This is going to be a lot more detailed than the average voter will need, but if you're doing voter registration, you will run into voters who are not the average voter. So I'm going to throw in a lot more detail than 99% of the people you deal with will need, but you might need it for other things. The second bit would be options for action by clubs and FAWCO clubs and club members with links, well, at least telling you where the links to digital outreach materials are. There are tons of things that we can use. And then hopefully the whole second half would be questions and suggestions as you have them. The thing I would like to start out by saying is that this process is not hard. A lot of people find the forms frightening and difficult solely because they don't use them very much. One problem with the registration form is that it has to suit the different needs of 57 different jurisdictions. So it is a weird little form in a way, but these days it is so much easier to fill it out using online facilities. So there's nothing that anyone should worry about here about how the difficulty of the process or whether they can surmount it. The only thing that we really need to be thinking about that's new is the need for speed with the disruptions and difficulties with mail service at the moment, which we have no guarantee will not continue. All the advice and information I'm giving here comes from the FAWCO website. All of the committee's materials are there. You click on U.S. issues and then U.S. voting. There's a home page with sort of a general article on the front, and you scroll down, and then there's U.S. voting articles, which appear at least monthly. We also do summaries for the NIB, so if you're a rep, you should be getting that. We also do materials for the U.S. issues bulletin, so there's hopefully a lot of places you can find this stuff. Everything that I'm posting on the website has links to our partner, the U.S. Vote Foundation, and the Federal Voter Assistance Program. Both, of course, are nonpartisan, and of course, FAWCO is nonpartisan in its approach. The foundation, as it says, is a foundation, and FVAP is a federal agency. Okay, there's three things we want the individual voter to do, and the first one is to register or request a ballot. Some states will keep you on the rolls, some will not, so we have to talk about both of these things. Primarily, everybody who has not yet registered to vote or request a ballot for the 2020 election needs to do it this minute. Do not wait, do not pass go, do not collect $200, rush off and do it right now. Go to the website of the U.S. Vote Foundation or FVAP and do the following things. You click on you have to identify what kind of voter are you, overseas, civilian, military, whatever. And you click on the links for overseas civilian voters and your particular state or jurisdiction. You enter the information required by your state. Because state requirements differ, that's different stuff for different states. But once you've clicked on, for example, my state, Texas, the website will only ask you the relevant questions. Once you've answered all of them, you generate a PDF. I would advise you to keep it because it's got information that you will need. And then you need to print it, sign it, and date it. I have put sign and date in bold because that's the part that voters most often forget. And if you send it in without a signature or a date, it will not be accepted. You'll have to do the whole thing again. And considering the cost of stamps and the problem we've got with the mail, that's really a bad idea. Anything else on that? Good. No, that's it. What kind of information do they want from you? This is, again, not frightening. There's only two kinds of info that you need to supply. Actually, the name of the form is FPCA, but it's a terrible name, and I try not to use it because people just find it confusing. The two kinds of information, the first one, it's information that identifies you as an eligible voter for that state, and that's the info in sections 1 and 2. Because the Constitution gives authority over elections to the state, you have to identify yourself as, in my case, a legitimate voter in Texas. The second part, which is much bigger in sections 3 through 6, shows where and how the local election official will send you your ballot. Section 7, again, is the signing and dating part. These days, you don't have to have witnesses on this except under certain circumstances, so that's good. In section 1, you identify what kind of overseas voter you are. If I really object to this, we are the only group of American voters who are required to give an indication about our future behavior. I pointed that out more than once, and nobody seems to care very much, but I really do object to it. Anyway, you say, do you intend to return? If you are an overseas citizen and you intend to return to the U.S., as I do eventually, you get a full ballot from top to bottom if your state allows you to get that. 1 or 2 do not. The downside of getting the full ballot is saying that you intend to return can make you liable for state and local taxes. I'm from Texas. State and local taxes, what are those? So that doesn't bother me very much. So I always get a full ballot. If you say your return is uncertain, you get a federal ballot only. If you say you never resided in the U.S., and that's the group that we refer to quite often as citizen children, even though some of them are not children at all anymore, in some states, you don't get a ballot. Some states do not allow you to vote if you have not had a certain amount of time in the state, especially as an adult. Something like 40 states permit people who've never resided in the U.S. to vote. My advice would always be to try. Trying is perfectly legal, and if the local election official turns you down, then you have to think of some other things. But anyway.
Mary Stewart?
Yep.
And those adult children who've
Yep.
never lived in the U.S., what address do they use to register?
Usually it's the citizen parent.
Okay.
If you've got trouble with that, it could be another relative.
Okay.
But we'll go on to that. The second thing they want in section 1 is some kind of numerical ID. That could be a state-issued voter registration thing, and you wouldn't believe the weird things you can submit in Texas to be able to vote. The state driver's license, if you have one. If you do not have either of these things, and you are likely not to have those things, part or all of your social security number will do. Usually it's the last 4 numbers, last 4 digits of the number. Some people have also used passport numbers with success. Again, you're just proving you are who you say you are to the state authorities. Section 2 is your voting address in that U.S. state or territory. According to the law, your voting address is either the last place you lived in the states or the last place you voted from, preferably the last place you voted from. It doesn't have to be that. For citizen children, it can be the citizen parent's voting address. It could be another relative. The thing is, you have to give a good, complete address. And this is something that some voters struggle with. It can generally be settled one way or the other, but you have to do it. You do not have to have any current connection with this address. It's just the address that identifies me, for example, as a Texas voter. My voting address is an apartment I lived in for 18 months, 40 years ago. It doesn't even exist anymore, but it's my voting address. So on we go. Okay. The other half of the information about where you want your ballot to be sent and how you want it to be sent to you. Section 3 is your current mailing address, wherever you now live, a forwarding address if needed. We have occasionally done voter registration, say for American students who are spending a semester in Denmark. Sometimes they have a forwarding address with the agency that's hosting them, but that very rarely happens. Section 4 is sort of optional, but it's a really good idea. Give your contact information, particularly your email address, for the use of the local election official, who I will sometimes call the Leo. You can also give your phone number if you want to. The aim is that they can find you if there's any kind of problem. And of course, if they are dispatching your ballot to you electronically, they're going to need your email address anyway. On to section 5, that's the preferred method of ballot dispatch. How do you want them to send it to you? The options on the form are mail, fax, and email. Nobody in America appears to know that there are no fax machines anywhere else in the world, but they don't seem to care about that. So your basic choices are mail and email. The advice we're getting at this moment from FAWCO is ask for email, electronic dispatch, if you can get it, if your state allows it.
Mary Stewart?
Yes?
I'm an Oklahoma voter, and
Yeah.
I can email my completed ballot to the FAWCO, and they fax it to.
Wow, that's good to know.
I know, it's really cool.
I hope everybody noted that down. Texas doesn't allow that. Again, we got 57 jurisdictions here, and you just have to find out what works. Texas will email me a ballot, apparently, but I'm not allowed to email it back. And do watch the rules for that. Emily was saying that FAWCO would fax her ballot. You generally have to follow up a faxed ballot with a mailed one. So
I do not.
Look at the rules. That's great.
My rules allow it, and
look at the rules for your state. That's always a really good idea. And there's tons of places to find it. Anyway, preferred method, section 6 is any additional information to assist the Leo in accepting your application. The advice used to be that we would advise citizen children to say, I am a citizen who lives overseas, and I'm using my citizen parent address. And frankly, we're being told now you don't have to do that. So, oops, sorry, didn't do that. What information you might put in, it's a huge box. One feels so enthusiastic about trying to fill it, but you generally don't need to tell them anything. You might, for example, somebody was telling me that they've established a new address in their voting state. That's the kind of thing you might want to say if you have anything to say at all. It's not required. Finally, there should be a multiple choice thing that pops up on your screen that says, which elections do you want to vote in? Always check the one that says you want to vote in all elections that may take place during the voting year. There are some, anti-voting states that will try to confine you to, say, the primary, which seems like a real waste of time. But always say that you want to vote in all elections that may take place during the year. Okay, you've put all your information in. You have created your PDF, you have printed it, you have signed it, you have dated it. Then you need to send the registration form or the ballot request to your local election official according to the instructions included in the PDF, preferably by electronic means, e.g. email, if your state permits that. If you've got a way to fax it to them, you can do that as well. Again, look at the rules for that. One of the reasons I urge people to keep their PDFs on file, even if they don't print out all the pages, you're only going to need to send 1 or 2 pages max. But you tend to get a 5-page form, and it's full of useful information like deadlines and the name and address and email and phone numbers of your local election official. And that's a very handy thing to have. Mine is such an enthusiast that she tends to email me and say, oh, you're all set up. And I go, great, great. But it's a very handy thing to have. There's a wonderful resource called the Voting Assistance Guide from FAWCO, called the VAG. I hate that there's the way acronyms proliferate in this process is really not very nice. The U.S. Vote Foundation website also has this information, updated info on ways to return the registration form and later your ballot. Do note that the rules for returning these two different things can be different. Did I hear a peep? No, okay. As everyone knows, there are interruptions in mail service at the moment. In theory, for example, we're not, mail is moving to and fro from Denmark, but I've heard that in other countries it may not be. The U.S. Postal Service website has got a list of the latest alerts on international mail service. All of these links that you can see in the presentation are in the articles I've got on the website. So I don't know if you probably can't click on the screen, but you certainly can click on the links in the articles. You might also want to check your local postal service for announcements about what's moving or what's not moving, because I don't think the information is always exactly matching. The U.S. Postal Service website lists these alerts in order of date, not alphabetical order of countries. You may have to rummage around for a bit, but that's a handy thing. Finally, after you have sent your registration form in, no matter how you sent it, let a little time pass, and I would really suggest checking with your local election official a few weeks afterwards, just to ensure that your status is good, that you're all ready to go and there are no difficulties. Almost any difficulty that may arise can be solved somehow. But you have to have the time to do it in. That's one of the reasons I'm always hopping up and down about registering as early as possible during a year. Most states have got websites that will list registered voters, and you can find out if you're there. For some reason, I never appear on the Texas one, but again, my local election official is always sending me updates and information, so it's not a problem for me. Okay, the second thing we want the individual voter to do is vote, for God's sake. Vote and return your ballot as soon as you receive it. We've always said that, but it's much more important now than previously. Always follow the enclosed instructions, which means you have to read them. If you can return the ballot electronically, you need to do that. That would be, again, the thing that's being recommended to us. Occasionally, we have had, a few years ago, the U.S. Vote Foundation got FedEx to volunteer to send things in for free. Well, that's fine, but again, check your instructions, because some states require a postmark, which is a bit of a problem. Sometimes you can get help from the embassy returning forms and things like that. But my local embassy has announced that they're not doing that at the moment, and they're not letting anybody in, and they certainly don't accept people turning up with envelopes. So that's not much of an option for us here. The ballot delivery has improved enormously in the last few years. It used to be that up to 25% of overseas voters did not receive a ballot or received it too late to submit it. And that has almost been eliminated. This is really a huge area of progress, and I'm really happy about it. Nevertheless, if your ballot does not arrive by 1 month before Election Day, and this year Election Day is November 3rd, you need to fill out and send a federal write-in absentee ballot, which I refer to as a FWAB, another terrible little acronym. If your regular ballot arrives after you've sent off a FWAB, vote and send your regular ballot as well, and let the local election official decide which one to count. This is perfectly legal. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and do it if you need to. The third thing we want individual voters to do, we want them to promote voting by all overseas Americans. Frankly, why not promote voting by in-country Americans as well. I'm just generally in favor of voting. From now until Election Day, but as soon as possible, please use every network and connection you have to share all of this information with other Americans and urge them to register and vote. You can do it personally through all your memberships and networks. You can work through your FAWCO club, social media accounts, church, school, business, everything you can think of. A FAWCO voting article gives links to digital outreach materials from both the US Vote Foundation and FAWCO. We are obviously going to be working remotely and online for quite a while. All of these materials from the foundation and FAWCO are, of course, marked with their names and not ours, but there's a lot of nice graphics. I voted buttons. FAWCO has some videos that are very nice and you might want to use. There's tons of stuff available, and I do urge you to use it. Email the FAWCO US Voting Committee. That would be me. That's my email address, voting@fawco.org, with questions or suggestions or requests to join the committee. I've only got members from about half of FAWCO clubs at this point. What can FAWCO members and clubs do? Use and share the updated information and resources provided by FAWCO on the section of our website. You can do tons and tons of stuff individually and as a club. Give voting information in the signature of your email. This was a suggestion from the committee that I have adopted. Put voting graphics and information on your website or social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you happen to do. And you can do this for your club website and accounts too. FAWCO has got a register to vote button on the home page, if I remember well. You do have to scroll down. It takes a little finding, but it's there. And club websites and other accounts can do that. I've been certainly dropping it into our discussion group in my club. Other ways to get the information out. You can give information on voting in your club newsletter, at virtual meetings of your club, and virtual meetings of your interest groups. You can have dedicated virtual events for voter registration and information. You can do or offer the same for any other group you belong to, or any U.S. expat group operating in your vicinity. You can work with the U.S. Embassy or Consulate if that's possible. Again, ours is just sending out email bulletins saying that they're not doing anything, including renewing passports. So that's sort of a non-starter at the moment, but of course that may change. Previously, we've had quite good cooperation with the embassy, but that can vary between locations. You can answer voters' questions yourself or direct them to FAWCO. Again, there's the email address for the committee, the US Vote Foundation, or FAWCO. Both the foundation and FAWCO have standard FAQs. They're really good, and help desks. Those who've been doing this for a long time would know that FAWCO used to have a dreadful website. It's now really good. It's very much better. Of course, their focus is primarily on the military, but they have a lot of good materials for us non-military as well. And let's not forget that this is the 100th anniversary of American women starting to vote on a national scale in this year. It's one of the things I was so looking forward to about the IM. One of the reasons I was so sorry that it had to be canceled, but so it goes. If you want information or materials to pep up your website, or things that you're handing out, or maybe virtual events for the club, there's a fun website called Ask a Suffragist. They've got articles, they've got this and that, and they've got all kinds of information about the exact dates on which states actually ratified the 19th Amendment, or the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which is the one that gave women the right to vote nationally. And I misspelled virtual. I'm really sorry. A whole bunch of U.S. museums and other institutions have suffrage-related exhibitions and have had them for up to a year. The ones I can think of off the top of my head are the National Portrait Gallery, the National Archives, the Library of Congress. Although nobody can get into the buildings to see them at the moment, a lot of the exhibits and other materials are available on their websites, and you could use them, you could direct people to them, you could have a virtual exhibition tour as an event. In addition, there's a whole bunch of YouTube videos on U.S. suffrage, including the whole of a more than 2-hour movie about the militant suffrage wing in America called Iron-Jawed Angels. They've got the full movie and clips, and then there's a bunch of short videos about the suffrage movement. So there's a lot of electronic material. And I couldn't resist adding this photo. This is a dirty trick pulled by Alice Paul on the Congress. The picture is of a huge, it's basically a boulder of white marble, out of which have been carved the busts of 3 famous American suffragists, Lucretia Mott in the front, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the basic philosopher of the group, on the left, and on the right is Susan B. Anthony. And we do have the rights to this because I took it. So on we go. Finally, thanks so much for your attention, and let's start talking about questions and suggestions, and I could even take some notes. Why don't I stop sharing? Thanks to everyone who turned up. It's very kind. Okay, do people have questions, suggestions, whatever?
Mary Stewart, could we have your PowerPoint presentation for our—
Sure, as soon as I have fixed the typo. I hate typos.
I know you do. That's one of the many reasons I love you.
There was another one in that same sentence, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is what happens if you think, oh, gosh, I should put something in there about that.
I just had a question, Mary.
Sure.
Do you know if any states are changing their policies regarding electronic submitting of ballots?
This is why I would urge you to keep an eye on FAWCO and the Foundation's information. You may even be able to ask your local election official if that's the case. We see that there is a great deal of discussion going on in the U.S. at this moment about the way in which the rest of the primaries and the general in November are going to be carried out. And what is it? 5 states do almost all by mail already. More than 40 permit absentee voting or mail voting that way under certain circumstances. But it is burdensome in some cases. North Carolina apparently requires a witness on an absentee ballot, which seems like a really stupid idea just this particular moment. But,
Can I throw something in?
Sure.
From the U.S. Standpoint, just in case you guys don't get as much information overseas. There's currently a huge debate over mail-in votes for the upcoming elections. Ironically, Overseas Vote Foundation is not in favor of digital ballots. Receiving digital ballots by email, okay, or download, but not returning them due to so much of the hacking and the Russian involvement that we've had in previous elections. So they're not supporting that in their advocacy efforts, but they are supporting vote by mail. There are a lot of people that are, some states require you to have a valid reason to request a ballot by mail, and they're trying to get that waived for the upcoming elections so that people aren't forced to go into these huge public gatherings. I'm sure you all saw the chaos we had in Wisconsin with their primary, and very few polling places and lots of people having to wait. The Republicans are fighting it like crazy for mail-in ballots. The Democrats apparently are very much in favor of it. it's a big controversy. So you're going to have to keep your ears tuned in. I don't think it's going to be settled anytime soon. I mean, and again, there's 57 jurisdictions who get to decide how it's going to be handled. So
we're gonna see a lot of court fights about this. There's just been one in Texas where the state attorney general, who's under indictment actually, declared that you couldn't use the disability excuse. You couldn't write disability as the reason you want an absentee ballot if what you meant was you're afraid of getting COVID. A court has just told him he's wrong, but I have every expectation that he will take it up by appeal in order to try to get that reversed. And we're in a situation where one party tends to support expanded voting and the other one tends not to, for obvious reasons. And as Johanna says, this is going to be a volatile situation. We, as overseas absentee voters, have an absolutely settled and clear process. And the only thing that worries me is ballot return, really.
Well,
and there's the possibility that the post office may collapse this summer. I hope it won't, but that's something we're still struggling with.
The other thing that's happened in some states is they've rejected mail-in ballots because the signature didn't match the ballot by mail request. So I heard Mary Stewart earlier talk about sign and date, and sign it legibly and then try to remember and sign your ballot the same way, because that's one way that they're throwing ballots out.
For example, I have two signatures I tend to use, but I only use one of them when I'm registering and when I vote. I use MS Burgher. The main thing is that what Texas wants you to do is to write your signature over the place where the envelope closes, so they can be sure that the envelope hasn't been tampered with. But it is something to worry about. Well, something to be careful about. I think there's less to worry about than many people believe. But anything else?
I have another question. It's kind of personal, but I think it's come up a lot too with some people I know, and that is, I vote in Florida, and so my kids who have never lived in the States, that's one of the states that doesn't accept children who have never lived there to vote. Should I just go ahead and should they just try to, register to vote and request a ballot online, or should we write directly to the voting official?
You could, well, you'd have to give them all that information anyway. I would go ahead and do the PDF.
Okay.
And then follow up with the local election official. Frankly, if the state doesn't want to use, if the state with your address doesn't want to use that, is there an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent in another state? We just had a case that somebody was telling me about this week, where somebody who wasn't a citizen child and had previously voted twice is now not being allowed to vote in Pennsylvania, but she has been able to sign up in Virginia. So.
Oh, okay.
As long, I don't care what state people vote in.
I don't care either, but yeah.
So.
Hi, this is Anne Marie. I have a question.
Sure.
So we all registered. We've been trying to register. My two girls are voting age also, from New York State. And we did get the absentee ballots this summer or this spring for the vote in the summer for New York.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean that we're registered for November also, or do we have to still do something again
it should do so
for November?
It should do so if you click the I want to vote in all elections for which I am eligible box. In the worst case, look at your PDF again, contact your Leo and ask them.
Yeah, because I had sent them a message and they didn't answer me.
Well,
Mary Stewart.
Sure.
This is
What?
Cynthia. I just looked
hi.
at my I just looked at my three children because we're all in Florida,
Uh-huh.
and fortunately they got driver's license, so at least they have an address. But anyway, at least in Florida, you can look up your county and you can put in the information, the name and the birth date, and see the status, and it'll say if you've requested a ballot for which elections.
Oh, that's handy. Yeah, do
By
look at your
mail-in.
state website. Most
Look,
states
I
have,
would
have
I
got
would do
that.
I would do that first before you call, especially now because nobody's in their office.
True.
So
Good
double check.
suggestion.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the state and county websites.
Yeah.
So I would look there first just to double check.
Yeah, thanks. It's always confusing when we go there. I'm never really sure if we're registered or not, and then we get it in the mail and we're like, oh, okay, I guess it worked.
Well, my registrar of elections in Harris County is a great enthusiast for voting. So and since she took office a couple of years ago, the number and quality of communications have strongly improved. So there's that. Anything else? How are we doing? We've got tons of time.
Mayor Stewart, this is Roseanne.
Hi,
Hi.
Roseanne.
I have a question and a comment. Comment quickly, and I think you know, we have no mail going out of Belgium to the States. So I took a suggestion and sent my ballot request to the embassy. So what I expect, that turns into a question, is how can I be certain that it made its way via the embassy pouch to the US? How much time should I wait to make sure that I get my ballot? Because I asked for return via email before I start jumping up and down and do it again. So that was question
if
one.
you can possibly ask the embassy if they did actually forward it, that would be good. What the embassy people have said here is that those pouches go out a particular time, maybe once a week, and they all go to the same processing center in Virginia, something like that. And then they get whatever's in them gets sent out
Yes.
wherever it goes. So in one way, it can be a much quicker hop over the Atlantic, and another way, it can be a much slower crawl over the continent.
Yeah, I was with the consulate before all this went down, right before all this went down, and they told us that it could take a good 3 or 4 weeks for something to arrive, depending on when you handed it in. If it, you know, if you just missed a pouch going out, it could be a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my second question comes from a member who permanently lives in Belgium and has no intention of ever returning. And she's very fearful of checking any box that says she may be going back to Pennsylvania. And how do I respond to her?
Well, the only thing she needs to worry about, of course, we always encourage people to tell the truth. The only thing she needs to worry about is if she clicks intends to return, that does make her liable for state and local taxes.
Okay.
And if that's not a thing she wants to deal with, and in the Northeast, those taxes can be quite high, she should say does not intend to return, especially if she does not intend to return. I personally am going back to Texas probably in a little box because I'm going to be buried next to my mother. So I'm definitely going back, but nobody knows when. And Texas has no state and local taxes, so it's not a problem for me.
I thought the phrasing had changed to "my return is uncertain."
Yeah, that is it. Intends to return and my return is uncertain, which doesn't require you to commit yourself. But it does get you only a federal ballot. I personally enjoy voting down to dog catcher. And in these days, you can generally find out about candidates' views and platforms from the League of American Voters, from the candidates' own websites, newspaper endorsements, that kind of thing. It takes a little research, but at least I'm not standing in a booth with a long queue behind me, and I can take as much time as I like.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Stewart.
Sure. Anybody else? Well, it looks like this is an informed group. Johanna looks amazingly awake, I have to say.
I applaud Johanna and
Me
for
too.
getting up at the crack of dawn.
It's not dawn there. Is it light? It can't be.
Oh.
It's not dawn yet. It's coming around though.
Yeah.
I have a question about statistics. This is Anne Marie again. About what's the percentage of overseas citizens, U.S. citizens that vote?
It's pathetic. One problem we have is that we're not counted in the census. We're not sure how many of us there are. There's various guesses. The high-end guess is 8 million people. And the average statistic I've seen for overseas turnout is like 4%, which is awful on any standard at all. When we go to Washington for Overseas Americans Week, which I urge everybody to look at that portion of the website as well, and urge Congress not to harm us every time they make rules about taxes, for example, or banking or anything like that. We've had elected officials who say, why should we care what you think? When there aren't many of you in my state, and those there are, they don't vote. Why, make us care. And that's one of the primary reasons, other than the fact that people died so we could get this right. But the practical reason is that they won't listen if we don't make them. And voting is the best way to do that.
Is the trend going in a positive way?
It can do. We didn't have this right at all. FAWCO agitated for it for years, and we've only had it since about 1976. So overseas Americans have had less ability to vote than American women or various other minority groups in the United States. But we really need to do better than 4%. Now that ballot dispatch and the application process and all of that is just so much easier, I don't know why it wouldn't improve more than it has, is the main thing. When I started doing this, which must be 4 or 5 presidents ago, I used to carry around the VAG, which was about an A4 document that's about 3 inches thick in those days, and a couple of pound stack of cardboard forms. And that was really very difficult. And you could only reach the people you got to. You could see face to face. And frankly, if we're going to have this emergency now, we're so lucky to have it when everyone's so connected and has all these opportunities for digital communication. There's no reason why we shouldn't have good turnout. God knows people can see how important it is who's running the United States.
I also think that what you do, Mary Stewart, and what Johanna does, and just to have this U.S. issues team is great for your clubs. It's great for FAWCO. It's a huge public service, and it's part of our DNA. And
Sure.
I think that your PowerPoint is really wonderful because it's like, a turnkey tool that clubs can use, even clubs that really don't do a lot in terms of community service or overseas American service. I think it's a great educational tool, and it's, it will really help FAWCO reps to say this is something FAWCO can do for you. And I hope that, since we're all sitting at home there, that clubs can kind of, have some virtual registration workshops, for instance.
Yeah. Actually, it might help if people were on their own computers doing this. One of the things about having a dedicated registration event is if I take my iPad or a laptop to a club event, the PDF will be sitting on my computer, and then I have to mail it to somebody. And if people are at home, they can be just sort of following the bouncing ball to show you how old I am.
Well, it sounds like something we could do virtually, Mary.
Yeah.
We could actually have a Zoom session, and people don't have to be looking at you. They can, let's all go to this website and register to vote.
And just do it. The thing is, if I'm doing it step by step, I'd be doing it for Texas, and they would need to do it for themselves. One good piece of advice: if you're going to do an event like that, remind people to collect the information they're going to need to give. Of course, they know what their current address is. Of course, they know what their phone number and their email address is. if I had written my address into my address book when I left the United States in 1981, I might not know what it was. And some people, you know, don't always have access, don't always use their social security number, so that number doesn't leap to their minds either. So it's a good idea to remind people to collect the information they need.
And Mary
They've had
Stewart,
an event like this. Sure.
just because I've been on this call and someone said that they'd looked online to see their status, I went to find mine to see if I could look it up. And on the National Association of Secretaries of State website, so that's nass.org.
Yeah.
There is a button you can click to get your voter registration status in all the states.
Okay,
So
I will put that on our website as well.
So you select your state, it takes you to your state election board. And I don't know if all the states do it, but my state did. So I was able to confirm that, yes, I'm registered this year.
It's a good initial resource rather than having to dig around for your own state's thing. Again, it's a reason to hold on to your Leo's information so you can get in touch with them. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I open the chat.
Mary Stewart, this is Beth Bachmeyer from Vienna.
Hi.
Hi. I also went and checked, and on the Oregon, I'm from Oregon, on the Oregon website, it literally told me that they had mailed my ballot on the 3rd of April.
Yeah, Oregon and Washington are my gods of voting. They're really marvelous. They have every facility for voters that I would like voters to have, and they're really incredibly voter friendly. I wish more states would follow their example.
Yeah, the one thing is that somehow, I mean, I know the address that I lived in when I lived in Oregon, but it's been 25 years. But I noticed this last, I went out and checked it again in March because originally I had planned that I would be back in the US. But of course, we all know what happened there.
Yeah.
And I went and checked, and somehow they had changed my address to my daughter's address.
Oh.
And
it's a good idea to check.
So I went and checked, and I actually wrote in the comments that because of Corona, I'm stuck in Austria. And and they wrote in a letter, I mean in a note on the bottom of the Oregon thing that where they had mailed it and when they mailed it. But like you said, Oregon's really they're blue, I guess. Anyway, the one thing, that website where you say you can go and check on an international or a US-wide basis that you had talked about, that one would not accept the zip code either from my daughter or from Austria.
Which one?
The one, the National Secretary of State, was that it?
They might want, most American websites now want not just the, how many is it 5 digits originally in zip codes?
Yeah.
Most of them now want the 4, most of them now want the 4-digit addition. But that's easy to find if you look online. I've got various American websites that object to my Danish zip code because it's got letters.
But the point is that I didn't have the US zip code because it's changed from when I lived there. And
well, that's why you
put in my Austrian one, it's only 4 digits. It wouldn't allow it.
Well, if it has changed, what you do is you Google look up zip code, and you'll pop into a website there. You feed the address in and the city and state, and it'll tell you the new zip code.
Yeah,
because
I actually
mine has
just
changed slightly since I left Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. I just used my daughter's address because that's
Okay.
my U.S. mailing address now. So.
Mm-mm.
But anyway, that national website didn't work at all for me, just like the IRS
Well,
website.
sometimes it won't, but as Emily points out, it's a national resource. I had to have it explained to me in words
Yeah,
formal that every state has got a Secretary of State. First time I heard Secretaries of State, I thought, who they? But each state has got one, and they have a national association, and they do cooperate on issues of voting. Maybe not as much as we'd like, but they do it. The other alternative would be the website that your particular state runs. I've never been able to find myself on the Texas one.
Secretary of State website.
No, that's good.
Yeah, it's the Oregon Secretary of State
Okay.
website that I looked on.
Well, that's quite, the state site is good. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah,
Bev, we're having trouble with your audio.
Yeah, I know. My husband gets on it and the Wi-Fi uses too much, and yeah. So my last question is, what do you do if the people that are on the board don't believe that there's enough interest from U.S. citizens?
Well, I don't recommend violence. I don't know. I think you could just try to sell them on it. Our board here is sort of, you want to do it, go ahead. So we don't have much trouble with that.
Okay.
I'll be as persuasive as you can. Maybe you could bring in some member of the FAWCO board to help you out, or me, or something like that.
I actually, the one comment that somebody made on the call just now, that, you know, if you want to get rid of the person that's running the country right now, we better talk about this.
What? Seriously? We're those of us who live overseas are often called by the embassy or people we deal with unofficial ambassadors for our country. Most people will know that we are also occasional flag catchers for our country. I've only had in my whole residence in Scandinavia one experience of somebody who marched up to me and announced they didn't like my country. And I explained it wasn't required. So anyway, but
when my daughter was in kindergarten, she got people attacked her all the time. All the parents told their kids, and all the kids gave my daughter a hard time.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But if we do have this role, and we do, why not exercise it? Why not try to exercise some influence over what people are holding us responsible for?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is my concern, because people come up to me and say to me that, you know, how could have you guys voted for this person and things like that, which I mean, I agree with them, but it's still. Anyway,
well, it depends on who they mean by you guys. My club did not vote for anybody. We are a nonpartisan group, and so is FAWCO. We don't take those stands.
Right. Of course we don't. But I meant the local people here.
Well, I don't know. I've been, as I say, I've only had that experience, and it was 30 years ago. Yeah. So things vary.
Okay. Well, anyway, I have to run.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Can I just throw something out, Mary Stewart, when you were talking earlier about Americans overseas, I did post it up on the Facebook page, but Americans overseas are entitled to the stimulus checks that are being distributed.
Indeed.
Is everybody aware of that? And
I've got mine already. This is Roseanne.
Wow.
Mine's already in the accounts as of last week.
Super.
And I'm waiting for my husband, who's not an American, who gets my Social Security for some crazy reason. He's supposed to get one also.
Wow.
Okay. And there is a method and I did post up about this. If you're a non-filer for taxes, you don't meet the earnings threshold, et cetera, you can still register on the IRS website. And I went through that process with my daughter because she has such a low income, she isn't required to file. She hasn't received the money yet, but I'll keep you posted. If that
Is that on your page? Is that on your page, Joanna?
It's on the Facebook page. I posted it, and it's really, you just go to irs.gov, and there is right on the homepage, a link for non-filers where you can go in and input your bank information so that you don't have to deal with the issue of this paper check that never gets anywhere.
And
So
I sent it to my son.
Okay, but there's an issue. There's an issue if you don't have a U.S. bank account.
no, you can put in a foreign bank account.
Well, my daughter tried, so we'll see. But there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of chatter here on the Facebook groups about people whose spouses aren't American, and they don't have a Social Security or a TIN number. They don't qualify. My son has 2 babies that are only 1 year old. They don't have Social Security numbers. So the tax person said he can't get the money for the babies yet, but whatever. So it's
you do have to have a Social Security number. I mean, that's the same for people in the U.S. I've heard many stories. They're married to a non-American. They're in process, but of course everything is shut down now, so they don't have a Social Security number. You are not entitled to a check if you do not have a Social Security number. I mean, there's just no way around that one.
No, but there's women that are saying they with a Social Security number can't get it because they filed jointly with their spouse who has a TIN number, not a Social Security number. It's messed up.
Yeah. That was a wrinkle. We were just excited that they included Americans living abroad.
I agree.
That was
since we all pay taxes, or at least file.
Exactly. But often we're collateral damage on the side. So that was a big positive in this. And I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that there is this link, or pass the information on that they can register as a non-filer.
Joanna, can we write an actual article and have that
Sure.
show on our
I'd like to put it in my club newsletter if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
Can we put it in the nib too?
Yeah, this all happened since the nib, so okay.
But it's
yes, please go ahead.
We'll link it to the article. I'll work on something.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Anything else? Well, we're just going over our time. Oh, sorry. Hi, Sally.
No, I was just saying thank you. It's really, I can't see you, but I've seen people I haven't seen in a long time, and it's just always nice to get ideas, and we're very fortunate to have you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
And I want to tail in on that for Sally, because it was nice to see you guys. I haven't seen some of you in years.
I know. I missed our March meetup.